Always good to see you.
You the Duke brother.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our annual Sports Legacy Symposium presented by the Hyde Family Foundation. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our annual Sports Legacy Symposium presented by the Hyde Family Foundation. I'm the television voice of our Memphis Grizzlies, Pete Pranica, and I am greatly honored to be here with you again for this symposium. Today, as we have for every MLK Day for the last 14 years, we pay tribute to athletes who have made significant contributions to both civil and to human rights. Tonight's honorees have laid the foundation for future leaders through their careers in sports, while always bearing in mind the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. So many times when we think of the legacy of Dr. King, we remember the marches that he led. We remember his remarkable gift for language and for oratory. But I think it would behoove us all to remember the process by which Dr. King helped affect societal change. He protested, he made his voice heard, but he did it in a nonviolent fashion. I was reading some of Dr. King's writings, and I came across this essay that he wrote in 1958 that he titled An Experience in Love. And I think what he says in this passage is important to remember not only today, but also tomorrow, and really for the rest of our lives, if we are serious about affecting societal change. Dr. King wrote in 1958, "Nonviolent resistance avoids not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. The nonviolent resistor not only refuses to shoot his opponent, but also refuses to hate him. At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. The nonviolent resistor would contend that in the struggle for human dignity, the oppressed people of the world must not succumb to the temptation of becoming bitter or indulging in hate campaigns. To retaliate in kind would do nothing but intensify the existence of hate in the universe. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate. This can only be done by projecting the ethic of love to the center of our lives." The Memphis Grizzlies are very proud to partner with the National Civil Rights Museum to host not only this evening's symposium, but a series of events this holiday weekend that give a platform to a critical dialogue that not only honors Dr. King's legacy, but asks us to continue and carry on the unfinished work. Pitt and Barbara Hyde, on behalf of all of us here in Memphis and the Grizzlies, thank you for your continued support. You were a vital part of the NBA pursuit team. You have been a champion of so many great causes here in Memphis, particularly the National Civil Rights Museum, and it is only fitting that you are sponsoring today's symposium. National Civil Rights Museum. It is a gem here in Memphis. Everybody should see it. Everybody should experience it. And with that, I'd like to welcome to the podium the president of the National Civil Rights Museum, Terri Lee Freeman.
Good evening. It is truly a pleasure to welcome you to this year's Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium. As president of the National Civil Rights Museum, I often describe the civil rights movement as one of ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Well, this symposium honors extraordinary athletes who have demonstrated their extraordinary athletic prowess on the court and their commitment to being extraordinary community citizens off the court. Dr. King implored us, and I'm paraphrasing here, to not settle for the intoxication of gradual progress, but recognize the fierce urgency of now. Although these words were uttered in 1963, they are certainly applicable today. These athletes that we recognize this evening are working in the now. I know we are in for a great discussion that will encourage us all to do more now. We all have gifts and talents that we should be using as much as we possibly can. So I thank you for joining us this evening. And now I'd like to introduce President of Business Operations for the Memphis Grizzlies and the FedExForum, Jason Wexler.
Thank you, Terri. Good evening and welcome to both those who have joined us today in the Built Ford Tough Practice facility at FedExForum and those around the world streaming online at grizzlies.com. I want to thank the Hyde Family Foundations for their continued partnership and support of this annual symposium. I also want to thank Terri Lee Freeman and the National Civil Rights Museum for helping the Memphis Grizzlies continue this annual tradition of celebrating the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In keeping with our strong partnership with the museum is the shared belief that Dr. King's example and the civil rights movement are not just something to be remembered, but are to be celebrated and put into practice in addressing the challenges that remain to this day. As part of that celebration, we are extremely pleased to finally debut the highly anticipated MLK 50 Pride uniform to be worn by our Memphis Grizzlies. Designed in collaboration with Adidas and inspired by the storied history of the Lorraine Motel. The uniform's use of iconic imagery, color, and design will bring greater awareness to the National Civil Rights Museum and its efforts to drive a deeper understanding of both the history and the ongoing movement for social and economic justice that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. inspires. It is also with great pride that I introduce today's honored guest, Kevin Earl Lloyd. Kevin joins us as a representative of the Lloyd family and the Earl F. Lloyd Foundation. This year, the Memphis Grizzlies organization has renamed this symposium to the Earl Lloyd Sports Legacy Symposium in recognition of Earl Lloyd as a standard bearer in sports, both as the first African-American player to play in an NBA game on October 31st, 1950, and as the first recipient of the National Civil Rights Museum Sports Legacy Award in Memphis in January of 2005. Please welcome Kevin Earl Lloyd.
I just want to thank everybody, please. I will make my statement quick and brief. I want to thank the Memphis Grizzlies for naming this platform after my father. And thank you very much. And thank the NBA and thank the Civil Rights Museum also. Thanks again.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Jason. We'd like to introduce our honorees. First of all, we need to acknowledge that, unfortunately, due to a family emergency, Lisa Leslie is not with us, but you do need to know something about Lisa Leslie. She enjoyed a 12-year WNBA career with the Los Angeles Sparks. She has been inducted in not only the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame, but also the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame. 2 championships, 3 MVP awards, 8 All-Star appearances, and all WNBA first team honors. She also has 4 Olympic gold medals and 2 World Championships with Team USA in FIBA competition at the World Championships. And off the court, she's currently a co-owner of the Los Angeles Sparks, and she's also launched the Lisa Leslie Basketball and Leadership Academy, focused on benefiting both the player and the person. Ladies and gentlemen, in absentia, a round of applause for Lisa Leslie. We're pleased to welcome back a previous winner of the Sports Legacy Award, a 7-foot center who played his collegiate basketball on the farm at Stanford University. He enjoyed a 13-year career in the NBA. He was drafted 18th overall by the Houston Rockets. During the 2012-2013 season, he made history as the first active male athlete from any of the 4 major North American professional sports to come out as gay. He chose to wear the number 98 in commemoration of the murder of Matthew Shepard, whose 1998 murder was widely reported as a hate crime, and it ultimately led to the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Prevention Act. In addition to being a former recipient of the Sports Legacy Award, he is also an NBA Cares ambassador and a recipient of the National Civil Rights Museum Sports Legacy Award, as I said, 2 years ago. Let's welcome back Jason Collins.
Thank you.
Our next honoree, another member of the media, an NBA TV studio analyst who played for 14 years in the NBA. He is a former NBA All-Star, playing with the Miami Heat, Atlanta Hawks, Portland Trail Blazers, San Antonio Spurs, New Orleans Hornets, and Charlotte Bobcats. He has an NBA championship ring from the 2002-2003 season with the San Antonio Spurs. He also owns an Olympic gold medal from Sydney in 2000. He is also the winner of the 2002 NBA Sportsmanship Award. 4 outstanding years under the legendary Judd Heathcote at Michigan State University. He left the school as its all-time leader in scoring. His off-the-court achievements include the J. Walter Kennedy Citizenship Award from the NBA. He has been a champion of education. In 1997, he made a $2.5 million donation to Michigan State that helped fund the Clara Bell Smith Student Athlete Academic Center, of course named for his mother. He has also set up the Steve Smith Charitable Fund, which began as an endeavor to help young people who went to his high school alma mater of Pershing High School in Detroit who wanted to go to Michigan State, but that effort has broadened to more and more students. Ladies and gentlemen, Steve Smith. Our final honoree is the current host of NBA Inside Stuff. Played 18 years in the NBA, 7 NBA All-Star appearances, originally drafted by the Detroit Pistons. Also played for Orlando, Phoenix, and for the Clippers. Won 2 national titles for Duke University. He also won a gold medal at the Games in Atlanta in 1996. He served as the vice chairman of the Special Olympics World Games, and in 2010 he answered the call from President Barack Obama to be a council member on the President's Council of Fitness, Sports, and Nutrition. He is also involved with First Lady Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, and he is also a part owner of the Atlanta Hawks. Ladies and gentlemen, Grant Hill. Gentlemen, it's great to welcome you here to Memphis. Jason has been a Memphis Grizzly. I was with Smitty in Portland. I was with Grant in Detroit for a period of time. So looking forward to a great conversation. All of you came of age after Dr. King's assassination. Smitty, I'm going to start with you. When did you learn about Dr. King's legacy and his work? And was that something you learned in school or from your parents? How did that come about?
I think at a very early age, I'm not sure of the exact age, but first of all, from my parents. They really instilled in my family about the civil rights movement, Dr. King, what he stood for. And I think the question I can remember over and over that my parents always instilled in me, you will remember, you need to know what Dr. Martin Luther King and everybody that was with them in the civil rights, what they sacrificed for you. So I think at an early age, and obviously learning the history books, but I also will say being a resident of Atlanta and getting a chance to come here again and go through the museum, unbelievable to get a chance to be a part of a little bit of history, to see both from the birthplace until his last days and the work he's done. And thank you to the civil rights, everybody who works there, a phenomenal job for the experience I got a chance to see. Everybody at St. Jude's, Memphis, the city, and the Grizzlies, I just want to say thank you. But it started with my parents, and obviously it's grown more and more for me, learning on my own.
Grant?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we're not that far removed from the civil rights era, although, I was born after it. And, my family as well, my parents, I think that's the first sort of introduction to Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights movement, and as they were going through their formative years, to experience it and to share those experiences. My dad grew up in Baltimore, was an adolescent, was at the March on Washington, got a chance to hear that speech in person, and just the kind of impact that had on him. And when you're young, you read about it, you hear about it, you learn about it in school, but I think as you get older, you really understand the history of our country, the history of the civil rights movement. And, it's been sort of an ongoing relationship with his legacy. And, that really, as we get to this point now, we're here this weekend. I've come to Memphis many a times, and you come and you eat it on Beale Street, you go play. And I've had a chance to go and visit the museum. But this whole weekend, I think, just really takes on his spirit, and the hospitality, the discussions, the interaction with a lot of Memphians, the pride they have for their city and for Martin Luther King and his legacy, St. Jude's, which I think embodies the same spirit. So it's been really quite eye-opening and fascinating. And with all that's sort of happening in the world, I think we need to be reminded of his legacy and the values that he was all about.
Jason?
Yeah, just like Steve and Grant, I first heard from my parents and then from my grandparents, especially my mom's parents who grew up in segregated South under Jim Crow in upstate Louisiana, hearing stories from them and just learning the history and those civil rights leaders that sacrificed so much their lives just so that I can have and we can have a better life. And they made the ultimate sacrifice for future generations, and I'm extremely thankful.
Let me throw this out to all of you because our good friend Charles Barkley once famously said, "I am not a role model." Some professional athletes, I'll use Tiger Woods as an example, don't necessarily feel compelled to become involved in societal issues. Tiger obviously has done some things with his foundation and such, but not in a real overt way. As a professional athlete, do you feel it is part of your obligation, for lack of a better word, to be socially active, to be a leader, to be a mentor to young men and women of color?
I'll take it first. I think I look at it more as, yes, we're athletes, but I think it's our responsibility as human beings. I don't really look at it as an athlete. Yes, love for kids to look up to me as an athlete, but that's only a short period of our life. I think what I stand for as a man, as an African-American man, I think is, yes, my responsibility to be a role model, to be an example, to lead the way, to give back. I was taught that from a young age from my parents, but more important, my village and my community. My mom always instilled making sure you understand you didn't make it on your own, and also seeing her example, what she did in my community in the city of Detroit. As a young age, it was hard for me to understand. I had a brother and a sister, but it was a lot of people in our community when I was a young age was called my mother Mom. And I say, what? This is confusing when I was young, but I understood now as I got older that she was mom to our community. So I think for me, it was instilled that we all should be a role model, not just because you're an athlete or not.
Yeah, the same. I believe that as well. And look, we are standing on the shoulders of giants and folks who, paved the way for us. And so it's not about being an athlete. I just think all of us. I think everybody in this room, regardless of your position in life, your job, the color of your skin, I think you have a moral responsibility and obligation to help others. And so, yeah, we're fortunate that we have a platform, we have the resources, we have access, all those things, are meaningful and helpful, but it's the soldiers on the ground who are day to day. And we have that in our lives and people that we know in organizations and causes that we try to support. But I think if more people sort of had that, it's not just on celebrities or athletes, but it's on all of us. We all have that obligation and that responsibility. And we're still working on Charles, so we hope that we can get him there. One day he'll embrace being a role model.
And then additionally, those stories need to be told, the possibility models. I'm just going to reference, I don't know if you guys have seen Hidden Figures, the movie that's out. And, I had no idea that these women existed. And, this one woman in particular, I think her name is Katherine Johnson, has a building named after her at NASA. And I had no idea. But just the more we can share those stories and as a possibility model for young kids to look up to, and whether it's in math, being a mathematician, or an athlete, but the more positive role models we can show our next generation for what they can achieve.
As professional athletes, being socially responsible, being active, because you have the bully pulpit of being on an NBA stage. What about the University of Missouri, where the football team was very concerned about an atmosphere of racism on campus, and they said, look, unless you get rid of the president, we're not going to play football. Now, these are not professionals. These are amateur athletes. I'm just curious as to your thoughts about kids at the collegiate level standing up and saying, look, this is wrong, and we're going to take a stand.
I was very proud of them. You know, in our society, you know, you said that they're collegiate athletes, but they bring in a lot of money to their university. And in our society, sometimes, as you know, we all know the case, money talks. So sometimes you have to put that economic pressure on people to do the right thing or to affect change in a positive way. We saw that, you know, even with Dr. King as an example with the the Montgomery buses and the boycott. The African Americans boycotted and put that economic pressure for change. So, you know, money talks, and you know, you can affect change.
Yeah, you know, I mean, during this weekend, Steve and I and Jason talked about this generation of athletes, student athletes and professional athletes, and understanding the platform they have, but understanding the power they have. And, you know, it's interesting. I don't get the sense that my generation did that or had that sense of awareness. And maybe, you know, maybe social media they've come of age in that social media age where everyone feels like they have a voice, you know, and so it's maybe you know, it's hard to sort of compare the two generations, but yeah, I think it's amazing. I mean, I think it shows that they're more than just athletes, great in football or whatever sport they're in, but they understand that what's right is right, and they stand for something that's important to them and something that's right in theory. So. Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish we could go back and redo some of the things and understand back in the 90s when I was at that period of time in college and early in my career, you know, really have that platform and that ability to have a voice and do something really impactful. So it makes me proud. It makes me proud that I'm sort of a part of a fraternity as an athlete, as a former student athlete, to know that these kids get it and they're doing the right thing.
To echo both Jason and Grant, they said it best, but then I think also, I look at it as the civil rights era, everything was done collectively, and what all the civil rights leaders sacrificed for us to have a better life. Then I think as our generation, we got comfortable. We became individuals. But as things started to change for the worse, I look at this generation starting to make change, like you say, economically, but more importantly, collectively again, coming together. You know, we all had things we, you know, believed in, but when you're an individual, it's hard to get change. But as that team, Missouri football team, coming together, as many numbers, strength in numbers, then you can have a chance to make a lot of change with collectively a lot of people.
Let's get a little younger, Smitty, because I know that you coach your sons in basketball. Give us a sense of how, as a mentor, a coach, you can prepare younger people, not yet high school or college age, not only to be good athletes, but also good citizens.
First of all, coaching my sons was difficult. That's good. But I think being able to be a youth coach, I loved it. I think the one thing is we got to get back to is not wins and losses. Asking a kid, did he have a great experience? And I think that's what it was lost. I think right now we look at youth sports and we have some talented individuals, but I think the pressure of being the next whatever it may be, is too young on these kids. They're not enjoying the experience of being a kid, playing a sport. I think also advice for me is giving these kids time to recover. They're playing too many games, in my opinion. Then also understanding what's very important. Youth, I mean, sports are great, but I think sometimes it's overshadowed of academics, spending time with your family, other things around sports. I know I play basketball a lot, but I'd never played this many games. When I look at the kids now, their schedule is more games than an NBA team, more games than a collegiate team. So I think letting kids be kids and making sure they have a great experience versus stats and wins and losses.
So life lessons, really.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think without a doubt, I mean, Smitty, I have two daughters. They won't let me coach them. They won't even let me offer advice. But he's right. I mean, they gotta have fun. And it's funny. My youngest plays soccer, and she's in 3rd grade. And the parents are at the game, and we're all like just in a frenzy, and like just because you want your child to do well. You want your child's team to do well. You put an emphasis. We keep score by who wins and who loses, and we can get caught up in our children's success. And then the team loses, and we're all in a bad mood. And then the kids, all they want to do is go through the high five line, and they're more excited to do that. And it just sort of reminds you that, as Smitty said, it's about having a great experience and having fun. And I think, when we were young and we were participating in youth sports, I didn't feel the pressure from parents. And I didn't feel like, parents wanted to live through their kids. And now it's just, you see it even at a very young age in sports where it's like people have this fantasy or this dream that their child will get a scholarship. I think sometimes they put so much money into the grassroots and playing that, they spend basically a college tuition on camps and gear and coaches and all these different things. But, the bottom line is it's got to be fun and you got to enjoy it. And there's lessons, valuable life lessons that we've all taken from our various athletic experiences now, are transferable into what we do now in life.
And I'll just add something that Smitty said earlier today, was just being a good teammate, those values of being a good team and talking as a coach when you're talking to the kids, like what does it mean to be a good teammate, sacrifice for the greater good. And I was always taught that with team success, with the overall team success, individual success will come along and acknowledgement will come along with that. So always put the team first. And for those who don't know, I have a twin brother. His name is Jaron, and he played 10 years in the NBA, and he's currently an assistant coach for the Golden State Warriors. So while he is in Oakland with his team, his wife and kids are in Los Angeles, so I become super uncle and take the kids to their basketball games, and they're 8, 6, and 4. So at that level, we're just trying to make sure that they have fun and are learning how to pass the ball and be the positive stuff that comes with youth sports.
We are in a very turbulent period in our nation's history as far as race relations are concerned. 1 week in July, we see the death of 2 black men at the hands of police, and then a subsequent attack on the Dallas police. As those events unfolded, what ran through your mind about how we are going to come together, how we are going to solve this? Almost sounds too strong, but how are we going to come to grips with what we're seeing right now in our country?
Well, it was, I think, a difficult time for everyone. And I think if, you wonder what's happening, what's going on here. Are we unraveling, as a country? We've made progress. We're not perfect, but we've made progress. And are we taking a step back? And so these are some of the questions that I ask and friends ask, and as we gather and try to internalize what's happening. and like I said, I think it calls for, and it definitely the message of Dr. King, we need to be reminded of that. So I'm still optimistic. As a man of color, you're connected to a legacy that has endured a whole lot worse. And so, it's civil rights, Jim Crow, slavery, and just some of the issues that have been a part of our country. And so we've come a long way. We might be taking a step back. We might have hit a speed bump. But I think as we talk about it and as we take time to get to learn each other and understand each other's differences, we can get through it. We can get through it. And I think sports can play a role, not just in terms of athletes using their platform, but, you go out here into this arena and you see all different types of people, different shades of color, different backgrounds rooting for the Memphis Grizzlies or the Atlanta Hawks.
Nice plug.
No, but I mean, and sports can galvanize a community. When they're in the playoffs, and I know they've had some great runs, and man, it's bringing this community together. And so, basketball. I mean, I can be from a foreign country. I may not be able to speak the same language, but we can play the sport, and it can bring people together. And it's about teamwork and sharing. And so, I just think, to answer your question, I guess, I do believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and we're going through a rough stretch, but we will learn from our own mistakes and our own successes and get through it.
Something that I can add, something that I participated with through the NBA. Let me backtrack a little. So I was so proud to see LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, D. Wade, and Chris Paul stand up at the ESPYs and speak out about the need for change, and then the NBA said, okay, now this is how we're going to help that change come about is through conversation. So there, I participated in one in Central Los Angeles. We went to a Boys and Girls Club. They brought in around 100 high school age kids, and they brought in around, about the same amount of local police officers, and had them play 3-on-3 and 4-on-4 basketball together, and then took them in a room like this, and then put them through different role-playing exercises so that the kids can understand where the police are coming from and just have that dialogue, the back and forth. And I love how it was all centered around basketball and the NBA, bringing, they're all from the same community, but police and young kids of color together to talk and have those conversations. And also, when you're playing, the basketball 3-on-3, you learn the police officer's name. So when you see that officer serving in the community, you know him as Officer James or Mike, or on a first name basis. Really cool to see, the NBA spreading that around our country, trying to start a dialogue and a conversation, because that's the only way things are going to change is by talking about it and having people talk. Yeah.
Totally right, Jason and Grant. And I think, like you said, when you hear about all these things that's, unrest situations happen, I think the first thing come to mind to me is, question is why? And obviously you want to find a way to have solutions individually, but it has to be collectively, I think. And I think also, Grant, you said something yesterday, we having conversations, but a lot of us talk at it. Then I think a lot of us don't really listen. And I think a lot of times being able to listen to somebody might not be the same background, same color, law enforcement. But I think also for a lot was going on for our youth in different situations in inner cities and all over the world, there's not the same amount of opportunities. And if all of us can play a small part in having these youth have opportunities, and I think, in my opinion, one of the things we need better is better public education. I think that is really hurting our society. And the list goes on, but I think just having compassion and being able to listen and also do your small part and understand if we all can do our small part, we can help in some kind of way.
I mean, Smitty, you've identified education. What are some of the other challenges you think that young people of color are facing now as they come of age and try to make their way in this world?
My own experience as a youth, being able to just walk through my neighborhood to go to the library. We had a conversation on open court, a very good discussion, whereas understanding, and I was going to talking to one of my colleagues, well, that library is not there. So to walk through 2 or 3 neighborhoods to get to that library, a lot of kids in different areas shun from doing that. So I think fear, violence in neighborhoods obviously brings a lot of unrest. So there's so many different things, but I think fear and going back to Dr. Martin Luther King, nonviolent approach is somewhere we have to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a deep issue, and I'm no way am I an expert, but I mean, it's interesting, and to reference Smitty referencing me, which I probably took from him, but but yeah, it's just understanding each other. I mean, it's probably some of it's obviously education, lack of opportunities, mass incarceration. Some of it's accountability, holding each other accountable, and sometimes when you take a side, then you're labeled. You're too liberal, you're too conservative, and you turn on the TV and they're not talking and trying to understand each other. They're putting their spin on it and trying to outdo one another. And I think that contributes to our overall psyche. But look, we have real issues and real problems in certain communities, not just black communities, but there's more white poverty than black poverty. We talk at each other. And so I don't pretend to have all the answers, but they're deep rooted. And if we can just continue to have the open dialogue, then we can hopefully make changes. But if you're young and you don't feel like there's any hope, and you feel like it's either crime or sports or, entertainment, then, it's very few Steve Smiths and Jason Collins in this world. And so, I'm sorry. Woke you up. But, I think back when I was a kid, all my friends, we wanted to play in the NBA. We wanted to be professional athletes. And I was just that one that was fortunate. And they worked just as hard and were just as committed, maybe more committed. I don't know, I'm rambling, but I think that's part of the issue, but it's probably a bigger issue as well. That's the reason why it's tough for young men of color.
Right. And Jason, when we talk about civil rights, it's not strictly black, white, Latino living together in harmony, LGBT. Your role as a gay male of color, former professional athlete, give us a sense of the leadership role that you have felt compelled to take on for that community so that they are recognized and not marginalized.
Well, going back to Dr. King, a member of his inner circle was a gentleman named Bayard Rustin. And I just recently found out about and learned about him. It needs to be like Hidden Figures Part 2 about him because all that he contributed to the civil rights era, but wasn't recognized because he was an openly gay black man. I go around the country and the world, encouraging people to live an authentic life, and I want people to, see that what is possible, and it goes back to that possibility model, trying to give an example to the next generation. You say, he did it, I can do it, or she did it, I can do it. We need more and more individuals to speak up and live their truth, because that's the most powerful thing is our stories. I've heard Billie Jean King, speak on this many, many times, that when someone comes out that it affects you, it can change an individual. I've seen it with my own eyes. There's an individual who started off very homophobic and has now become a strong ally of the LGBT community because now he knows someone. Before it was some abstract, that's a gay person, but it's like, I know John or I know Jason. And now, I want to support them. How do I do this? And it goes back to education, educating yourself. So yeah, there's opportunities to have for people to make change. But it starts with the power of coming out and sharing that story.
It's also the power of communication. And so what I'm hearing, whether we're talking about racial issues or sexual orientation, it really is an opportunity, or people maybe need to take it upon themselves to familiarize themselves with someone who is different than they are and not come at it with some preconceived notions. Is that a fair statement?
Without a doubt. And, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Okay. Without a doubt. I mean, I think of how brave and courageous Jason was. And I was in the NBA. I was playing, well, I was on a team. I wasn't playing. But I had good seats, though. But, you have to really commend and applaud him, because we know the locker room, it's a taboo subject. And, the language, I can only imagine what he had to endure, how uncomfortable he was, and maybe others who, who haven't maybe come out. And for him to be brave enough, and he's still playing, to do that, I mean, that is just awesome. And he is a trailblazer for the movement. But it sparked conversation. Mm-hmm. And people were honest, which was great. And so when you have different perspectives, different thoughts, and you're talking about it, it was one of the most powerful moments for that season. And of course, we lost to the Grizzlies, so that would have been powerful too. But it was powerful because it really changed people's perceptions. It made us really think about it. The idea if a player was in our locker room and how would he be treated, and so that act, I saw it firsthand in our locker room on our team, and not only did it sort of incentivize and make others who are living that same experience as Jason feel comfortable about coming out, but it also changed the perceptions of those who maybe aren't, but maybe weren't as supportive. And so anyway, what he has done is, I mean, it's amazing, and I can't thank him. And I'm honored to share the stage, and he showed a lot of courage, and anyway, I just wanted to say, I think conversation,
yes,
understanding, that's the key to making progress.
Yes.
Great words by Grant, and just want to echo, just like Jason said, educate yourself on something that you don't particularly maybe understand or agree with, but also understand and having compassion for others. Having that word is simple, but respect for others. And also having a little patience before you pass judgment. So just some of the simple things to go through in life, that's kind of what I wanted to say, and also to commend you, Jason.
Thank you.
Because that took a lot of bravery.
Thank you. I remember something that a coach once said to me, is like, it's okay to be uncomfortable, because that's when you grow, that's when you learn. So, try to put yourself in an uncomfortable position and see how you will react and how you'll treat other people. You'll grow as a human being when you're uncomfortable.
We have literally 2 minutes before we need to wrap this up. A final word from each of you, and I'll start with you, Grant.
No, I really want to thank the city of Memphis, the organization here, the Memphis Grizzlies, the folks at St. Jude Hospital, the National Civil Rights Museum, and just, this is a wonderful weekend. I obviously I was honored and humbled to receive this award, really not knowing what to expect, and not knowing that it would be just an unbelievable experience. And so I just thank everyone for their hospitality. You guys are continuing to carry that torch that Dr. King and all the civil rights leaders, that spirit is felt here in Memphis, and I just want to thank everyone for this wonderful, wonderful weekend.
I just echo Grant, and again, I said it, but just to say thank you. We've had a lot of experiences in our life, but some of these experiences that you stand and stop. I was reflecting last night in the hotel room and saying, wow, wish my mom could have got a chance to see this. So to having this experience and sharing it with you guys, I want to say again, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I too will echo Grant and Steve and say thank you to the City of Memphis, St. Jude Hospital, National Civil Rights Museum, heck, even B.B. King's for the great rhythm and blues I've been listening to the past couple nights. And congratulations, Grant and Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I also want to thank Gus's Fried Chicken. Yeah, they were good.
We had a lot.
My wife's going to be mad at me for saying that. I'm sorry.
Ladies and gentlemen, how about a big round of applause for our honorees, Grant Hill, Steve Smith, and Jason Collins. On behalf of the Grizzlies and the City of Memphis, Shelby County, the National Civil Rights Museum, the Hyde Family Foundations, and all of us on stage, all of us with the Grizzlies, want to thank you so very much for being here. This has become a real treasured part of the MLK weekend. We're thrilled that you're here. We would hope that you would take the words of these gentlemen into your local community and to keep the conversation going, to keep the spirit of Dr. King alive, and to help fulfill his legacy as we move forward. 8 o'clock tip, Grizzlies Bulls. Tonight's game presented by AutoZone. Be in your seats early for the presentation of the National Civil Rights Museum Sports Legacy Awards. And then at halftime, we have Gallant as our halftime performer. Thank you again so much for being here. God bless you all.
Let's see who won the game.